How often do you see that consumers are really victims of reckless lending? Out of every 10 people that come to you?
I'd say 70% of the customers that we
Really?
speak to have not had a genuine change in circumstance, but have just overborrowed, got into a debt spiral because the banks have consistently lent them more money than they could afford.
How much responsibility rests on the consumer? How much responsibility should you say the consumer should take?
It's a two-way street. You know, let's face it. You borrow. There's two schools of thought. You borrowed the money, you should have to pay it back. You know, and at the same time, you know, we can consider that we're constantly getting text messages being told we can borrow more money. We're constantly being flaunted payday loans that say that if we can just get by.
Without proper financial assessment.
Exactly.
Without actually sitting down with the consumer and also verifying the information that the consumer gives you. What I find very distressing is that people will say they'll do a financial assessment,
Yes.
and then they'll tell you, "Yeah, but put that in, put in 2,000 Rand for that, put in 3,000 Rand for groceries." I'm saying, but I spend more than that. No, don't do that. Put that in there, put that in there, put that in there.
If they do that at all, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So you do find that there is perhaps a level of crookery in terms of the financial assessments being done, not in reckless lending, but in when financial assessments are being done. I don't think that all creditors are above board in the information that they take down.
You're absolutely right, and we could say a little bit about some of the consumers as well. But for the most part, you know, banks and creditors are driven by targets, which means that the people on the sales floor need to get to their target, and it's hard to maintain quality control levels across the board. So people get away with things that they shouldn't be able to get away with, which is why, you know, we really need to crack down on reckless lending and start showing people what's really going on.
At National Data Advisors, you would advise people to come to you before or after they get into arrears?
You know, it's, listen, if you know that you're going to be struggling financially, it's always best to, you know, get in front of the problem and sort it out straight away. But for the most part, nobody really wants to believe that they're struggling, you know, and we will see them after they start to struggle. What we don't want is for them to come and see us when they've been struggling for too long, because then it's really difficult to help them.
Do you think that reckless lending by creditors is going to come to an end anytime soon?
It's a very poignant and important question. You know, it's the National Credit Act only took off five, six years ago, and debt counselling is only really finding its way now. Reckless lending is going on day in, day out. You know, I don't. Once again, will the creditors make more money by continuing on their current track, or will they make more money by cleaning their act up? It's somebody's got to do something about it
before we see any real change to the system.
Absolutely.
And again, it's one thing, I'm always concerned that it's one thing to have rules and regulations and acts in place, but it's the implementation of those pieces of legislation which is so important. And if we don't implement that, if we don't implement the fines, if we don't implement the consequences, if we don't implement exactly what the act and the legislation says, that is when, once again, consumers are going to find themselves at the short end of the stick.
And a chain's only as strong as its weakest link. And if the people on the telephones who work for the creditors aren't being trained properly, if they're not being monitored properly, then, you know, then the whole system falls down.
Thank you, Sebastian, for coming into the studio, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you, Moeshfieka. It's a pleasure being here.
Are you a victim of reckless lending? If so, let us know. Perhaps we can help.